All right, so you sent over this fantastic LinkedIn article by Miguel Nogueral on how to navigate change. And I gotta say, it's pretty cool. We're gonna deep dive into this thing today.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in there.
I mean, we're talking neuroscience,
Hmm.
psychology,
The
emotions.
whole thing.
It's a lot. And I think there's a ton here that's really gonna be useful, I think, for anybody.
I agree.
We'll be looking at three models in particular: SCAR-F, Bridges transition model, and Quy Huy's framework.
We'll be unpacking those.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Absolutely.
So to kick things off, I think we should probably start with the SCAR-F model.
Let's do it.
This is the one, right, that kind of dives into the neuroscience behind why people resist change.
It's fascinating, yeah. It really highlights how our brains perceive and respond to change at a fundamental level.
And it gives us, I think, some really good actionable steps, too, for how to
Yeah.
overcome those obstacles. So there are 5 domains, right, that it identifies.
Yep. Status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Each of these domains plays a crucial role in how our brains evaluate change.
So status, I think, is pretty self-explanatory.
It is. Yeah.
Right. We all want to feel valued and important.
Hmm.
And change can really threaten that sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, think about it. Any change that makes someone feel less competent or less respected is going to trigger a threat response.
Totally.
And when that happens, resistance is almost inevitable.
So a good example, I think, that
Yeah.
Nogueral uses in his article is a company merger.
That's a classic example.
Yeah, where there's all this uncertainty.
Absolutely.
And right, you don't know what your place is going to be in the new.
You're coming in with your team from one company
Right.
and another team from another company, and it's like, well, wait, am I valued here?
Exactly. So if leaders can proactively address that, like celebrate each team's accomplishments, show that everybody's got something.
That they're bringing something to the table.
Yeah, to offer that would really help ease that sense of threat.
It sets the stage for a much smoother integration, absolutely.
Okay, so that's status. Then there's certainty, which I think is a big one for a lot of people. I know it is for me.
Oh, yeah. We crave predictability.
Change, by its very nature, kind of throws that out the window.
And that can be really unsettling.
And anxiety-inducing.
Absolutely, especially when people don't know what to expect.
So what can leaders do to address that need for certainty when things are changing?
Communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
Even if all the details aren't finalized, providing a roadmap,
Yeah.
even if it's a high-level one, just kind of shows people the general direction things are headed.
Yeah, give them some anchors.
It helps. Exactly. Exactly. It's like, okay, things are changing, but there's a plan. I get it.
I think that's a big one, like knowing their a plan, even if it's not,
Even if it evolved.
every single detail.
Exactly.
Makes a huge difference
Huge.
in how people perceive it. So say you've got this tech company that's undergoing a big restructuring. They may not know what the team structure is going to look like months down the line, but just outlining the phases.
The phases, the key milestones. Yeah.
Saying, okay, here's where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where we're going to be in 3 months. Here's where we're going to be in 6 months. That would be a really effective way.
It's a way of creating a sense of order in the midst of all that chaos.
Okay, next up is autonomy.
Ah, a big one for so many of us.
Yes.
That feeling of control, or rather the lack of control when change happens, really undermines our sense of agency.
Absolutely. So how do we, as leaders, or even just as individuals going through change, how do we make sure we're addressing that need for autonomy?
Well, empowering people is crucial, even within the constraints of the change.
So even if you can't give people complete freedom, you can still give them some choices.
Exactly. Choices within their sphere of influence.
Right, like maybe you're implementing a new project management system.
That's a good example, yeah.
Right, you can't let people choose whether or not they use the system.
Right, that's a given.
But you can give them, some autonomy in how they organize their tasks.
Absolutely, how they set up their workflows. That sense of control, huge difference in how people feel about it.
Okay, so we've got status, certainty, autonomy. Now, relatedness is a big one, especially when changes are happening that impact teams or roles. People start to feel really isolated.
They can, and that's because we're social creatures. We thrive on connection, and change can disrupt those connections.
So how do we maintain those connections?
Leaders need to step up and cultivate that sense of relatedness, team-building activities,
Okay.
regular check-ins, just creating opportunities for people to connect and share their experiences.
So it's not just about keeping those social connections alive, but also maybe even emphasizing those shared goals.
Exactly. reminding everyone that they're working together toward a common purpose, even if their roles or the way they work is changing.
And finally, the last piece of SCARF is fairness, which is, I think, particularly important during situations like promotions, layoffs, anytime there's a sense of competition.
Absolutely. Perceived unfairness erodes trust like nothing else.
So how do we make sure that we're addressing that need for fairness?
Transparency in decision-making is crucial,
Mm.
especially during those tough changes. Explaining the rationale behind decisions,
Mhm.
offering equal support to those affected by the change.
Even if you can't please everybody, just showing people that,
That there's a rationale.
yeah, that decisions were made thoughtfully
Yes,
goes a long way.
it does. It builds trust, even when people don't agree with the outcome.
Okay, so we've got this really good foundation now, I think, with SCARF
Yeah.
for understanding how the brain reacts to change.
Yeah, it's a great starting point.
But now we want to layer on another model, and that is William Bridges' transition model, which,
Which adds that human element, that emotional experience of change.
yeah, so it moves beyond the neuroscience into the feelings that people are actually going through.
The journey, so to speak.
And he outlines 3 distinct stages: endings, the neutral zone, and new beginnings. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We all kind of go through those phases.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that people might move through those phases at different paces, too.
So starting with endings,
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You're letting go of the old ways, even if those old ways,
They weren't perfect, but they were familiar.
right, they're comfortable.
Exactly. There's a sense of loss.
There's a little grief involved.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of leaders might be tempted to,
To jump over it.
yeah, to just
Yeah.
brush it aside.
Say, nope, that's done.
Look ahead.
Here's the new thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
But it's important to acknowledge that sense of loss and give people time to process it.
Yeah.
Even holding a symbolic event to mark the ending of the old ways.
Like a farewell.
A farewell, exactly. It can provide closure and make the transition feel less abrupt. I love that idea. Then we move into the neutral zone,
The messy middle.
that in-between time where things are uncertain
Yeah.
and people are kind of figuring out this new reality.
Where the old ways are gone, but the new ways aren't fully formed yet.
Right. And you said this is a phase that requires a lot of letting go from leaders.
It does.
What do you mean by that?
Letting go of control.
Mm.
You can't micromanage the neutral zone. It's about creating a space where it's okay to experiment, make mistakes, and learn as you go along.
Right. So providing support and guidance,
Absolutely.
but not dictating every step.
No.
That's the important part. And then finally, new beginning.
Where the excitement builds and the vision for the future starts to feel real.
I love that. So to support people during this phase, it's important for leaders to articulate that vision clearly. So not just like vague promises.
Exactly. Be specific. Paint a vivid picture of what's possible.
Yeah, what this new reality actually looks and feels like. And I think celebrating those early wins can be a really good way.
It's great for building momentum.
Yeah, to kind of solidify that sense of we're moving in the right direction.
It's a reminder that change can be a really positive thing.
Okay, so we've got SCARF, we've got Bridges' model, and there's one more framework that I think we should bring into this conversation, and that is Quy Hui's model, which is all about using emotion-based actions to
elicit positive emotions.
yeah, to actually elicit positive emotions during change.
Yeah, and it works so well in conjunction with those other 2 models. It's like the icing on the cake.
So how do we do that? How do we use emotions to strategically influence how people experience change?
So Quy Huy identifies 5 key actions: authenticity, sympathy, hope, fun, and attachment. And they sound kind of touchy-feely on the surface, I know,
Yeah.
but they have a huge impact on how people experience change.
So let's break those down, starting with authenticity. I'm guessing that this is about,
Leading by example,
yeah.
being genuine, being transparent, even when things are tough.
So no more corporate jargon.
No. Be real. Be vulnerable. It's okay to admit when you don't have all the answers.
Right, because that builds trust.
It does.
When people see their leaders being authentic and vulnerable.
They're more likely to be open and honest themselves, which is essential during change.
Okay, what about sympathy? We talked about empathy being important, but how does sympathy go even further?
It's about validating those emotions, not just understanding them.
So it's not just saying, I understand this is difficult.
Mhm.
It's saying, I hear what you're saying. I see your struggles, and I appreciate your willingness to go through this.
Exactly. It's about making people feel seen and heard and acknowledging that their feelings are valid.
Okay, hope, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, right? Hope is
Essential.
essential,
Yeah.
especially when things are uncertain and a little bit scary.
When you don't know what the future holds, hope is that light that guides you forward.
So how do we, as leaders, inspire that hope?
By focusing on the possibilities, the opportunities that this change could bring,
Mm.
sharing stories of success, celebrating those wins.
Right.
It's about painting a picture of a brighter future.
Okay. Now, fun.
Yeah, this one often throws people for a loop.
It still feels a little counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. Change is often stressful, tense. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit of fun
Mm-hmm.
can help break that tension, reduce stress, and spark creativity.
So it's not about ignoring the serious stuff.
No, of course not.
It's about recognizing
Finding that balance.
that we're human
Yeah,
and we need those moments of joy and connection,
absolutely.
especially during difficult times. And finally, attachment.
The sense of belonging, that feeling of being connected to something larger than yourself.
Which can be really challenging when everything around you is changing.
It can, yeah. So it's up to leaders to foster that sense of attachment
Mm-hmm.
by recognizing people's contributions,
Mm-hmm.
investing in their development,
Mm-hmm.
giving them opportunities to grow and contribute their talents in new and exciting ways.
You know, people feel like they're part of something meaningful.
Yes. Even as things evolve.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where people feel valued and supported, even in the midst of change.
Okay, so we've explored Scar-Off, Bridges transition model,
Mm-hmm.
Quy Huy's framework.
A powerful trio
Oh,
when it comes to understanding and navigating change.
We've got this really good foundation. We do. And I think a lot of actionable steps that people can take.
Absolutely.
But before we move on to part 2, I want to hear from you. What are some of your initial reactions to these models?
Yeah, what's resonating with you? Share your thoughts, and we'll be back soon to continue our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to dig a little deeper into how to actually put these models into practice. You know, there's one thing to talk about Scarf and Bridges and Quy Huy, but then it's like, okay, what do I actually do with this information?
Right. Real life is messy.
Yeah.
It rarely fits neatly into a model.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, I think it helps to create a sort of roadmap, a framework for applying these ideas
Okay.
that you can then tailor to your specific situation. Okay, I like the sound of a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we start?
Our first stop is assessing the needs of everyone involved.
Okay.
This is where SCAR-F is so valuable.
Okay, so we're putting on our neuroscience hats.
We are.
And we're thinking about status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness.
We're basically asking ourselves, where could this change trigger a threat response?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And if we can anticipate those threats, we can start to develop strategies to minimize them before they even become a problem.
So if you're, say, implementing a new performance evaluation system,
Right?
you might anticipate a threat to people's status.
Especially if it changes how their contributions are recognized.
Right. Or if you're restructuring teams.
A big one.
Yeah. Certainty is probably going to be the issue.
Absolutely. People might be worried about their roles, their responsibilities, who they'll be working with.
That fear of the unknown can be really paralyzing.
It can. So it's about providing as much clarity as possible, even if you don't have all the answers yet.
Okay, so we've done our SCARF assessment. We've identified those potential trouble spots. What's next on our roadmap?
Next, we turn to Bridges' transition model, our guide for navigating the emotional journey of change.
Okay, so now we're shifting gears a little bit from the neuroscience of it to the more human side of things.
To the feelings, the experiences people go through when they're facing change.
Right, and Bridges breaks it down into those 3 key stages: endings, the neutral zone, and new beginnings.
Each stage requires a different approach, a different kind of support.
So let's start with endings. We talked about this a bit before, about how it's important to acknowledge the loss of the old ways.
To give people space to grieve.
To grieve, even if those old ways weren't perfect.
They were familiar.
They were comfortable, they were known.
Exactly. So honoring that, marking that ending in some way can be really powerful.
So maybe a ritual, a ceremony, even just taking some time to reflect on what worked well in the past, to say goodbye to that chapter.
It's about showing respect for what's ending.
I think a lot of leaders might be tempted to just skip over this part.
I know, it's tempting to rush ahead.
Yeah, to focus on the future, to get everyone excited about the new thing.
But trust me, taking the time to acknowledge those endings will make the whole transition smoother in the long run.
Okay, then we move into the neutral zone. That messy middle where things are uncertain and people are trying to figure out this new reality.
A time of confusion and exploration.
You said before that this stage requires a lot of letting go from leaders. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's about letting go of the need to control everything.
Okay.
The neutral zone is not about micromanaging, it's about empowering.
So instead of giving people a step-by-step instruction manual,
Mm-hmm.
we give them a compass and a map
Yeah.
and let them chart their own course.
It's about trusting people to find their way, to experiment, to learn as they go.
And maybe providing some short-term goals or celebrating those small wins to keep the momentum going.
Exactly. Those little victories can make a huge difference in the neutral zone.
Okay, so we've honored the endings, we've navigated the neutral zone, and finally, we reach new beginnings. This is where the excitement starts to build and the vision for the future starts to feel real.
It does, and it's the leader's role to articulate that vision clearly and compellingly.
So we're painting a picture of what's possible, right?
Exactly. Showing people how this change benefits them, how it aligns with their values, how they can contribute their unique skills and talents to this new reality.
It's about creating a shared sense of purpose and excitement.
Exactly. And as those early successes start to emerge, celebrate them. Let people see that the change is working, that the future is bright.
Okay, so we've assessed those needs with SCARF, we've guided transitions thoughtfully with bridges, and now it's time to bring in Quy Hui's framework to help us elicit those positive emotions that make change more effective and, honestly, more enjoyable.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond just surviving change to actually thriving in the midst of it.
Okay, so let's talk about those 5 actions: authenticity, sympathy, hope, fun, and attachment. How do we actually put those into practice?
Well, authenticity starts with being real, being transparent.
Yeah.
Let people see that you're human, that you don't have all the answers, and that's okay.
So instead of pretending to have it all figured out, you're
Okay.
saying, look, this is a journey for all of us.
Yeah.
Here's what we know,
Here's what we don't know.
and here's how we're going to figure it out together.
That kind of honesty builds trust and makes people feel like they're part of the solution.
Okay, what about sympathy? How do we go beyond empathy to that genuine sympathy that makes people feel seen and heard?
By really listening, I mean truly listening to what people are saying.
So not just waiting for your turn to talk,
Right.
but actually hearing those concerns, those fears,
Validating those emotions.
validating those emotions, yeah. And also, I think recognizing the sacrifices people are making during the change.
Absolutely. Acknowledge that it's not always easy, that people are putting in extra effort, that they might be feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Just that acknowledgement,
Can go a long way.
yeah, can make a world of difference. Okay, hope, I think we all kind of intuitively understand the importance of hope, especially during tough times.
Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate hope in the midst of change?
By focusing on the possibilities, on the potential that this change holds, share stories of success, celebrate those early wins, anything that helps people see a brighter future.
Yeah, it's about shifting the narrative from, what if this doesn't work,
To what if it does?
to imagine what's possible if we succeed. Okay, now, fun. This one, I gotta admit, I'm still a little unsure about.
I get it. It can feel counterintuitive.
It feels like, are we really going to be playing games while the company's restructuring?
Right. But it's not about being insensitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that even in the midst of challenge, we need moments of joy,
Mm-hmm.
of laughter, of connection,
So maybe a brainstorm session with a playful twist?
or a team-building activity that gets people laughing,
Or even just incorporating some lighthearted moments into meetings
just to break the tension.
to celebrate progress. Yeah.
It's exactly. It's about bringing some humanity to the process.
Okay. And finally, attachment. How do we create that sense of belonging and commitment during times of change when people might be feeling insecure or disconnected?
By showing them that they matter. Recognize their contributions, invest in their development, give them opportunities to use their talents in new and exciting ways.
It's about helping people thrive,
Yeah.
not just survive.
Not just survive, exactly. To see change as an opportunity for growth, for learning, for expanding their horizons.
Okay, this has been super helpful.
I hope so.
We've got this great roadmap for navigating change, from assessing needs to guiding transitions to using emotion strategically. Anything else we should keep in mind as we're putting all of this into action?
One final point.
Okay,
Monitor and adjust.
what do you mean by that?
Well, change rarely goes exactly according to plan. There will be unexpected challenges. People will react in ways you didn't anticipate.
So we can't just set our course
And expect smooth sailing.
and assume everything's going to be fine.
Exactly. We have to be flexible, to be responsive to feedback, to be willing to adjust our approach as needed.
It's about seeing change as a journey, not a destination.
You got it. And remember, even with all the best models and frameworks, the most important thing is to lead with empathy, with authenticity, and with a genuine desire to support your team.
So it's not about being perfect.
It's not about having all the answers,
It's about listening deeply
about showing up with compassion.
and navigating the change together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so this part has been all about that roadmap, about how to actually use these models in the real world.
About turning insights into action.
And before we move on to our final part, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, what's resonating with you so far? What questions do you have? Share your thoughts, and we'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into navigating change.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into navigating change.
And we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We've explored the neuroscience,
The emotions,
the psychology.
the whole human experience of change.
We even saw how one company used those models to successfully navigate a digital transformation.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
It is. But now it's time to make it personal.
Time to bring it all home.
To talk about you and how you can use these insights in your life.
Whether you're leading a team through a big change,
Or navigating personal transitions.
it's all relevant.
So in this final part, we want to leave you with a few takeaways.
And a question,
A big question.
one to ponder as you continue on your change journey.
I'm ready. Hit me with those takeaways.
The first one is this. Change is constant.
It's a part of life.
It's what keeps things interesting.
It's what keeps us growing.
So instead of fearing change or trying to resist it,
What if we embraced it?
what if we saw it as an opportunity
For learning,
for innovation?
for evolution, yeah.
It's a mindset shift,
A big one.
but it's so worth it.
Okay, so we're embracing change.
We're armed with knowledge.
We've got these models and frameworks in our toolkit.
What's next?
What do we do with all of this?
Action.
Right, because knowledge without action.
Is like a podcast without listeners.
Exactly. So we encourage you to experiment.
Take one small step.
What would a small step look like?
Well, if you're facing a change at work, think back to the SCARF model.
Okay, so status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness.
Is there one of those elements that might be triggering resistance
Maybe there's a lack of certainty about the future.
or a perceived threat to autonomy?
Okay, so then what?
Brainstorm some practical ways to address that,
Using the principles we talked about.
like holding a Q&A session to provide more information.
Or involving team members in decision-making.
Even small actions can make a difference.
What about for personal transitions?
Think about Bridges' model.
Those 3 stages. Endings, the neutral zone, and new beginnings.
Where are you in that journey?
And what kind of support do you need to move through each stage effectively?
And how can you use those emotion-based actions from Quy Huy's model to make the transition more positive?
Maybe it's practicing more authenticity.
Or injecting some fun into your day.
It's about remembering that even in the midst of uncertainty,
There's always room for hope,
for connection.
joy.
Okay, so that's a lot to think about.
It is.
But before we sign off,
We have one final question for you.
the big one.
Think about a change that you're currently facing
Or anticipating.
in your personal life.
Or professional life.
Now imagine you could apply just one element
From all those models we talked about.
to make that change more successful,
More fulfilling.
easier to navigate,
Which element would you choose?
and how would you apply it?
That is a great question. It really makes you think.
Spend some time reflecting on it.
Write down your thoughts.
Discuss it with a friend.
The more we understand these principles,
And the more we put them into practice,
the better equipped we'll be to face any change that comes our way.
with confidence,
With resilience.
and maybe even...
And a little bit of joy.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you found it insightful.
And remember...
Embrace change and keep learning